Okay, we're good. I'm sorry.
It's good to see you again, Rabbi.
You as well. Okay, good morning, everyone. We are in the middle of Os Aleph in the 5th chapter. Okay, so the spiritual realms, we're talking about different parts of creation, and we're at the 2nd paragraph, and he writes like this. Vulam, he says, however, after discussing the fact that there are spiritual entities, the forces and the angels, which was one category, and then he spoke about the physical entities, the things in this world as we know it on this earth, and things beyond this earth, like the sun, the moon, and all the planets. Vulam nimtza min echad shel nevram, there's one category of creation, shuchamo emtsai ben ruchani vigashmi, which is somewhere in between, or really right in between, spiritual and physical. It is something which is not sensed by our senses. It's also not limited by typical physical properties and limitations. So all physical things we know have certain parameters, but it doesn't have those. And therefore, because it is not something which we could sense, and because it's something which doesn't have the regular physical limitations of other physical things, therefore people inaccurately call it spiritual. Okay? But it is completely separate from the category of angels. Okay, so although it is not limited by physical things, and therefore one would think that it's more angelic, he says it's not the same category. Even though it is similar, to angels in certain fashions. It has unique properties, okay, and unique limitations, according to its own reality. And this category is called Sheidim. These are what we loosely translate as demons, maybe, but it's Sheidim. Sheidim is the correct translation. Okay, and also demons themselves have many different, within the species of demons, there are many different types. They are all part of this general category called Sheidim. Okay, so let's just talk about Sheidim very briefly. He's going to go back.
Like forces as opposed to demons?
Well, why would he say that?
I don't know, because it seemed like saying demons was a negative connotation.
No, so it is a negative connotation. We'll see. They, for the most part, have a negative role in this world, and he's going to talk about their role and what they do and what but he's not up to that just yet. But we'll stick with Sheidim and demons, because forces, I don't want to confuse it, because kochos, we spoke about this concept of forces being these completely spiritual forces. So just very briefly, because the Rambam in his Perush Mishnayos in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, he says Sheidim never existed, and he rejects the notion of Sheidim. And the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, he was a rationalist. The Vilna Gaon says he was too much of a rationalist. The Vilna Gaon says, he goes ballistic. I'm not going to use all the words he uses because I don't have the audacity, but the Vilna Gaon could do this. He basically says, I don't understand. He says, what, the Ram didn't have our Gemaras? He says the Gemara talks about Sheidim all the time. He says, and therefore he says, and not only is he a rationalist, he says he was too immersed in philosophy and it corrupted his mind. Okay, pretty strong words. And listen, the Gra had tremendous respect for the Rambam, but this, he said, there's certain places where he felt the Rambam crossed the line. He says this is one of them. He says, of course they're Sheidim. The Gemara talks about them all the time. How could you possibly reject them? And then there are many who, including his own son, including the Rambam's own son, who defends the Rambam's position by saying, the Rambam's son, who is actually more of a mystic, suggests that Sheidim were experienced only in dreams, and that's what the Rambam meant. He says Sheidim were an entity, but they weren't an entity like angels are an entity, but rather something you only experience in dreams, and that's what the Rambam meant. And there are many different ways of explaining. Some understand it's more of a broad term for destruction in the world, but it was more meant to be understood metaphorically, not literally. But one way or another, most reject the Rambam's view and say, no, there were Sheidim. The Gemara talks about all these stories, fascinating stories about Sheidim, and therefore they reject the Rambam's view. It is worth noting that they all acknowledge, or many acknowledge, the fact that whereas in the past Sheidim were something that people seem to interact with all the time. Have any of you interacted with Sheidim in the past while? I hope not, right? So
only when I whistle.
Only when you whistle. Okay, wow. Okay, we could talk about whistling and Sheidim, but generally,
whistling. The Gemara says the whistling brings on the Sheidim.
Okay, so it does. There is discussion about whistling and Sheidim, but the truth is, sorry.
In the Mapalas that you go.
In the Mapolis, that's right, in the destructive place. But the bottom line is, we have many commentators saying that Sheidim only existed, the Maharal, let's just go with the Maharal. The Maharal says that Sheidim only existed back in the day when the world was not so populated. Because Sheidim, like exactly like you said, the Gemara in Brachos, where the first Gemara that talks about Sheidim, says they show up in places which are desolate of people. You go to ruins, and that's where the Sheidim hang out. But nowadays, says the Maharal, the world is so populated, right? The world population has grown, and most places are just so populated, we don't have these interactions. They basically, more or less, have removed themselves miles from all places, all of civilization, because there's so many people, and because the human population has grown to such an extent, and therefore we simply don't interact with them. And therefore, yes, while they did exist during the time of the Gemara, we do not interact with them. You can whistle all you want, because we don't have interactions with Sheidim, because they are kind of banished from the world.
My grandmother was very upset that